Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something that might just change the way you see everyone around you. From the person you love, to the person you admire, to the person staring back at you in the mirror. If you really want to see someone's true character, pay attention to just two things: how they treat others when they are in power, and how they respond when they are in pain. Because those two moments, those two windows, will show you more than years of conversation or decades of smiles ever could. Stay with me, because by the time we're done, you're not just going to understand people better. You're going to understand yourself deeper. Ladies and gentlemen, if you truly want to understand the nature of someone's character, don't watch them in their moments of weakness. Observe them in their moments of strength. It is not adversity alone that unmasks a person. Power is just as revealing, and sometimes even more so. You see, there is a certain grace that exists when someone is struggling, because when you're low, humility often follows you like a shadow. You're forced to rely on others. You learn to listen. You walk carefully because your survival depends on it. But when someone is elevated, when they step into influence, position, or leadership, when the crowd starts to cheer and the world begins to bow, that's when the real test begins. Because power doesn't always corrupt. Sometimes, it just reveals what was hiding all along. There's a story about a young man who grew up in a poor village. Humble beginnings. He helped his mother with chores, always said thank you to the elders, and was known for his gentle demeanor. One day, through education and discipline, he rose to a high political position. People praised him. They said he remembers where he came from. But months passed, and something shifted. He stopped greeting the janitors. He overlooked the beggar who used to share food with him. He interrupted elders in meetings. Power hadn't changed him. It had unmasked him. You must understand the way a person behaves when they have the upper hand, when they no longer need to be kind, when they are not dependent on anyone else's approval. That's when you see the truth of their spirit. Because respect born out of necessity is not the same as respect born out of discipline. True respect, true humility, exists regardless of position. Consider for a moment how a manager treats their team. A good leader is not the one who barks orders and gets results through fear. A true leader is the one who, even when they have the authority to command, chooses to guide. The one who notices the person who's been quiet all week. The one who gives credit in public and takes responsibility in private. Power does not inflate the ego of such a leader. It deepens their commitment to serve. And this is not just about the workplace. It shows up in families too. How does a parent, who is physically stronger and emotionally dominant, treat their child? Do they speak with tenderness, or do they govern with intimidation? It shows up in relationships. How does one partner, who earns more or holds more societal clout, treat the other when decisions are being made? Do they consider, or do they control? The great philosopher Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power. Not how much he gains, not how loud he speaks, but what he does with that authority." Because power, like water, takes the shape of the vessel it's poured into. And if the heart is cracked, the power will leak out as arrogance, cruelty, or indifference. There's a story from ancient China about a general who was given command over a large territory. His predecessor had ruled with an iron fist, and fear hung over the region like fog. The general, however, decided to lead differently. He went to every town square, listened to the complaints of the people, shared meals with the poor, and visited families who had lost loved ones in war. When someone asked him, "Why are you so humble when you have so much authority?" he responded, "Because those who carry weapons must also carry compassion. Power without empathy is tyranny." Ask yourself, who do you become when you are elevated? When you have the right to choose, the freedom to act, the status to demand, what do you do with it? And perhaps more importantly, observe this in others. When someone receives success, how do they treat those who aren't in the spotlight? Do they still remember the names of the people who helped them? Do they still open the door for others? Or do they wait for someone to open it for them? There's something deeply spiritual about watching someone who has every right to boast, choose instead to bless. Someone who can command silence, but instead chooses to listen. That's not weakness, that's mastery. In the monastery, the elders often say, The loudest gong is the one that is hollow inside. It may produce a sound, but it carries no depth. In the same way, people who let power swell their ego reveal that they have not yet cultivated inner stillness. True character does not yell for attention. It speaks softly, because it does not need to be heard to feel important. Now, let us transition, not in thought but in depth, to the second revelation of character: pain. Where power reveals what's within you when the world is at your feet, pain reveals what's within you when the world is falling apart. Pain is a sacred teacher. It doesn't knock politely, it breaks the door. It doesn't whisper, it howls. And in those moments, when you're hurting, disoriented, maybe even ashamed, you are forced to confront parts of yourself you might have buried. But here's the truth: what you do with that pain is what defines you. Some people, when they are in pain, become cruel. They lash out. They carry their wounds like weapons, striking others because they haven't found the strength to sit with their suffering. They confuse volume with healing, noise with transformation. They become what hurt them, hoping somehow that vengeance will feel like justice. But vengeance is not healing. It is a performance of power in the absence of peace. There's a powerful image from nature, the Japanese art of kintsugi. When a bowl breaks, instead of discarding it, the artisans repair it with gold. The cracks are not hidden, they are highlighted. The bowl becomes more valuable not because it was never broken, but because it was broken and restored with intention. So it is with the human soul. You can meet someone who's been betrayed, but instead of building walls, they built wisdom. You can meet someone who's lost everything, but instead of drowning in bitterness, they chose to deepen their empathy. These people didn't let pain define them. They let it refine them. Think of a mother who's lost her child and still finds a way to comfort other grieving mothers. Think of a man who's been wrongly imprisoned, but instead of becoming hardened, uses his experience to reform the justice system. These are not just good people. These are transformed people. They've done the hardest thing imaginable. They've made meaning out of their suffering. There's a quote from Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That is the invitation of pain. Not to fight the fire with fire, but to walk through the flame and come out forged. In the temple, when students face physical exhaustion, mental fatigue, and emotional breakdowns, they are taught to sit, just sit, not run, not distract, not deny, because only in stillness can you hear the wisdom of pain. Only in stillness can you choose your response. One student, after failing his martial arts test for the third time, stormed out of the courtyard. He refused to speak. Days passed. Finally, he returned and asked the master, "Why must pain be part of our path?" The master replied, "Because without it, your ego would be your only teacher." Pain humbles. It forces us to examine ourselves. Not to ask, "Why me?" but "What now?" Not, "What did I lose?" but "What can I learn?" The shift is subtle, but powerful. It changes you from victim to vessel, from one who suffers to one who transforms. And let us be clear, not all pain is noble. Some of it is inflicted by unjust systems, by betrayal, by evil. But even then, your response is your canvas. You cannot always choose the suffering, but you can always choose the meaning. And when you meet someone who is going through pain, listen not just to what they say, but watch how they live. Do they isolate or reach out? Do they seek understanding or spread their suffering? You'll notice, people who are aware of their pain tend to carry themselves with a quiet dignity. Not silence, but dignity. Because they have faced the shadow within themselves and emerged with light. They don't need to prove their strength. They've lived through the fire. On the other hand, people who avoid their pain often try to control others. They raise their voices not because they are powerful, but because they are afraid. They demand control, not because they are strong, but because they feel powerless inside. This is why pain reveals character, not in the hurt itself, but in how the hurt is handled. And so, between these two, power and pain, we are given two mirrors. One to see how we hold others when we rise, and the other to see how we hold ourselves when we fall. If someone passes the test of power, but fails the test of pain, their character is incomplete. If someone survives pain but abuses power, their transformation is corrupted. Both must be held. Both must be watched. And you, dear listener, are being invited to look at both, not just in others, but in yourself. What do you do when people are watching? And what do you do when they are not? Who do you become when you are praised? Who do you become when you are broken? Your answers to those questions reveal the soul behind your smile. There's something fascinating about the way people treat those they believe are beneath them. Not just how they interact with people who hold no influence, but how they regard the silent, the unseen, and the ones who cannot return the favor. You see, if you want to see someone's true character, don't look at how they treat their boss. Watch how they treat the janitor. Don't just observe how they speak to those who can promote them. Listen to how they address those who can't do anything for them at all. The third lens through which true character is revealed is how someone treats people who are of no advantage to them. This might seem like a simple test, but it cuts straight to the root of integrity. Because in a world so conditioned by transaction, what can you give me? What can I gain from you? How can you elevate me? Genuine kindness has become one of the rarest currencies. It is often only offered when it comes with return on investment. But character, real, grounded, cultivated character, operates with a different motivation. It sees human dignity not as something earned by status, but something inherent in being. It knows that every person carries a story. Every soul carries unseen battles. And that even the quietest presence deserves to be treated with decency. There's a story of a renowned CEO who was known for his innovation, his intelligence, and his leadership. But what truly set him apart wasn't found in boardrooms or meetings. It was in the way he greeted the security guard by name every morning. How he asked the cleaning staff about their families. How, when one cafeteria worker was hospitalized, he showed up quietly and paid the bill. Not because it would ever make the news. Not because anyone would praise him. But because in his eyes, position didn't determine value. Presence did. Now contrast that with the executive who walks into a room and never looks up from their phone. Who ignores the waitress unless it's to complain. Who greets their colleagues with smiles but treats the Uber driver as invisible. This isn't just about manners. It's about the orientation of the heart. Because when respect is selective, it reveals that it's not respect at all, it's calculation. Children observe this more than we think. A child doesn't just watch what you say, they absorb how you live. When they see you speak one way to someone in power and another to someone in need, they learn that value is conditional. But when they see consistency in your kindness, they understand that character is not something you put on like a suit. It's who you are when no one is watching. There's an old proverb that says, the true measure of a person is how they treat someone who can do nothing for them. Not because those moments are morally impressive, but because they are the most revealing. They show whether your integrity is rooted or rehearsed. In the monastery, students are often given menial tasks during their early years, sweeping leaves, washing the temple floors, cleaning after others, not as punishment, but as purification. Because in those moments, when no glory is attached to your effort, when no praise follows your labor, you're forced to meet yourself. Are you still diligent? Are you still respectful? Do you still act with presence? Or do you grumble and shrink when no applause is expected? One student, new to the temple, asked the master after several days of cleaning, "When will I be allowed to begin martial arts?" The master looked at him and said, "You already are. Every movement, every sweep, every breath, you are learning to move without pride. That is the first discipline, and it is so in life. True power is not in who you impress. It's in how you treat the ones who don't matter in the eyes of the world. The tired cashier, the elderly neighbor, the child too young to praise you. These are the quiet moments where your soul is exposed." There was a man who every morning walked his dog through a local park. Along the path, an elderly woman sat selling flowers. Not many people noticed her. She didn't speak much. Her stand was modest. But every day, without fail, the man would stop, buy a flower, and smile. Not because he needed more roses, but because he understood something. Sometimes the smallest gestures carry the deepest weight. One day, the woman handed him a small note along with the flower. It simply read, "Your kindness is the only reason I keep coming here." And that's the truth most people forget. You never know what your smallest act of kindness can mean to someone else. You never know who is barely holding on. And if your heart only beats loudly for the powerful, it has not yet learned to love. This lens, how people treat those who can't repay them, is not just about identifying others' character. It's about cultivating our own. It's about training ourselves to live with open eyes and an open heart, even in a closed-off world. But this naturally brings us to the fourth layer of revelation. The moment when someone is denied what they want. Because it's one thing to be kind when life flows your way. It's one thing to be generous when your resources are full. But how does someone behave when the answer is now? When they don't get their way? When boundaries are set and limits are enforced? This is the realm where entitlement is exposed. You see, character is not only revealed by how someone uses power, but by how they respond to power they cannot control. Rejection, delay, resistance. These are the chisels that shape the truth. There's a scene that plays out every day in airports. A flight is delayed. Tension builds. You see some people curse at the airline staff, shout in frustration, demand compensation. Others, though visibly disappointed, take a breath, find a seat, and wait. Same circumstance. Different reaction. What's the difference? Character. Because crisis doesn't create behavior, it magnifies it. Pressure makes the inner self visible. It pulls the mask off and shows what was beneath all along. There was a young woman applying for a competitive job. She had the qualifications, the charm, the connections. But when the position was given to someone else, she stormed out of the interview process, spoke harshly about the organization online, and tried to sabotage the reputation of the person who was selected. In her mind, she had been robbed. But in truth, her response revealed a mindset conditioned to believe that doors must open simply because she knocked. And that's a dangerous illusion, to think that desire equals entitlement. Because no matter how talented you are, no matter how hard you've worked, there will be moments when life says, not now, or even, not ever. And how you respond to those moments says more about your soul than any success ever will. Rejection is one of the most honest teachers we'll ever encounter. It shows us what we worship. Do we worship validation, control, winning? Or do we honor the process itself? There's a story of a monk who trained for years to master a certain skill. He believed that if he could perform it flawlessly, he would be promoted within the monastery. He practiced endlessly. Finally, he presented it to the elders. They watched quietly, then nodded and dismissed him. No promotion, no praise. That night, he sat in silence, angry, confused. Eventually, he went to the oldest master and asked, "Why was I overlooked?" The master replied, "Because you were performing for position, not for purpose. Until your heart seeks mastery instead of recognition, your progress is incomplete." That truth applies to every path in life. Whether you're an artist, a teacher, an entrepreneur, or a student, if your peace depends on applause, you will always be a prisoner. If your self-worth dissolves the moment a door closes, you were never standing on solid ground to begin with. And watch closely how others respond to limits. When they are told no, do they sulk? Do they blame? Do they retaliate? Or do they reflect? The way someone handles rejection reveals whether they have built their identity on expectation or discipline. Expectation says, I deserve this. Discipline says, I will grow from this. One crumbles under denial, the other rises. There's a quiet strength in the person who is told no and still walks with dignity. Who, when plans fall apart, still treats people with respect. Who, even when disappointed, chooses not to destroy but to understand. This strength is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is mastery. Because it means your emotions do not govern your behavior. Your ego does not sit in the driver's seat. You are not enslaved by outcome. You are anchored in purpose. The most dangerous person in a room is not the one who gets what they want. It's the one who remains kind when they don't. Because that person has learned to master themselves. And self-mastery is the foundation of all lasting influence. One of the most powerful examples of this was a man who applied to be part of a high-level leadership council in his community. He campaigned ethically. He spoke with clarity. He built trust, but in the end he was not selected. When people expected him to lash out or retreat, he did neither. Instead, he volunteered to support the new council's efforts. When asked why, he said, Because I didn't campaign to lead. I campaigned to serve. And service does not require position. That is the spirit of someone whose character has been shaped, not by outcomes, but by intention. So now the question becomes, how do we respond when life humbles us? When we're told no, do we become bitter? Do we seek revenge? Or do we become deeper? Pain may shape us, yes, but rejection reveals the strength of our root system. If your roots are deep, no storm will uproot you. If your roots are shallow, even a soft wind of disappointment will topple your sense of worth. To cultivate unshakable character, you must embrace both truth and tension. You must be willing to look at how you treat those beneath you and how you act when you're beneath others. Both reveal who you are. Not who you say you are, not who you hope to be, but who you truly are when no one's watching. The journey continues, and with every observation, we gather more than insights. We gather awareness. And awareness is the first breath of transformation. The way someone responds to adversity is often the truest mirror of their inner world. It's easy to look composed when the sun is shining, when the water is still, and the winds are calm. But character, genuine, deep-rooted character, reveals itself when the storm comes, when plans fall apart, when health declines, when relationships rupture, when expectations crumble. In those crucible moments, something either rises or withers inside us. Adversity is not just a challenge to overcome. It is a revealer of truth. Imagine a man standing at the edge of a cliff, watching the horizon. In the distance, a storm begins to gather. He feels the wind shift. The air grows heavy, and as the rain begins to fall, his instincts tell him to retreat. But instead, he plants his feet. Not because he is trying to prove something, but because he knows that life was never meant to be lived only in sunshine. He knows that every great tree once survived a violent storm. Every river carved its way through resistance, and every soul of depth was formed in the fire of trial. We often admire those who appear composed under pressure. We say they're strong, resilient, or unshakable. But what we often don't see is the inner work that built that strength. That person didn't become grounded in the storm. They were grounded long before it ever arrived. There's a profound story from the martial arts world. A young disciple had been training for several years in peaceful conditions. His forms were flawless, his precision unmatched. But one winter, a sudden flood destroyed part of the temple grounds. The students were sent to help rebuild. Cold, tired, and working in mud, the once graceful student grew irritable. His discipline cracked. He spoke sharply to the others, complained, resisted. The master pulled him aside and said, "You have perfected your movements in silence, but now you must perfect your mind in the noise. Only then will your training be complete." This is the essence of adversity. It reveals what your internal training has truly accomplished. It's the classroom of the soul, where theories are tested and illusions are stripped away. Many people think adversity builds character, but the more accurate truth is that adversity reveals it. The character was either there, being silently cultivated through choices, disciplines, and small sacrifices, or it wasn't, and the storm merely showed it. Consider the image of a glass filled with dark liquid. If you bump it, what spills out is not something caused by the bump. It's simply what was already inside. In the same way, life will bump us all. The question is, what spills out? Anger, blame, bitterness, or patience, insight, endurance. There was once a woman named Lena, a single mother of 3, working 2 jobs, and just managing to stay afloat. One day, without warning, she lost her primary income. Her rent was due. Her children needed food. Friends offered advice: sue the company, shame them online, go on a public rant. But she chose a different path. She woke up the next day, packed lunches for her kids, prayed, and then went out job hunting. When asked how she could stay calm, she said, "Because if I let my emotions lead, I'll lose more than a job. I'll lose myself. My children don't just need food. They need to see a mother who doesn't break under pressure." And that's something rarely spoken about. That in the midst of adversity, we're not just living through pain. We're shaping the next generation's understanding of strength. When you stand upright through struggle, you don't just survive, you mentor without speaking. Adversity introduces us to ourselves. It confronts our expectations. It challenges our beliefs. It strips away the luxuries of convenience and asks us, what remains when nothing goes as planned? Pain is a language few want to learn, but it is a language that speaks the truth. There is a concept in Zen Buddhism called Kensho, which refers to moments of insight into one's true nature. Interestingly, these moments often arise not during meditation or bliss, but during hardship. When the ego is disarmed, when pretense dissolves, and when you are too tired to pretend, it's in those raw, unfiltered spaces that you meet the truth of who you are. And it is in that meeting that transformation begins. One of the monks in a Himalayan monastery shared a profound story. A student had been undergoing a long fast, part of his spiritual discipline. But midway through, he became frustrated. The hunger wasn't bringing peace, it was bringing rage. He confessed to the elder, "I thought fasting would make me holy, but all I feel is anger." The elder smiled and said, "The anger was always there. The fast just removed your distractions." And this is exactly what adversity does. It removes the illusions and presents what we must confront. This is why adversity is not your enemy. It's your reflection. It's not here to punish, but to purify. Too many people define themselves by their achievements, their income, their status. But those things are circumstantial. They can be stripped away. And when they are, what are you left with? That's your essence. That's your character. The man who holds integrity without income. The woman who walks with dignity without applause. The child who shares even when they have little. These are the souls adversity cannot destroy, because they were never built on fragile foundations. And yet, not all adversity is dramatic. Sometimes it's silent, the slow erosion of hope, the daily pressures of caregiving, the invisible grief of loss unspoken, the long, hard road of trying again and again and again. These are the adversities no one sees, but they are just as real and just as revealing. There was a janitor in a large school, Mr. Rosario. Every day he came to work with a smile. He greeted students, sang as he cleaned, and often left small notes of encouragement on classroom doors. No one knew that at home, his wife was battling terminal illness. That each day, after work, he would rush to care for her. When asked how he could remain so joyful, he replied, "Because sorrow will have its place. But I choose where it can and cannot live. It cannot live in how I treat others." That kind of perspective is not accidental. It is cultivated. It is watered daily by choice. And that is the secret. Character during adversity is not the result of a single heroic act. It is the result of thousands of unseen choices made in the quiet. Even in ancient martial arts, students were taught not just to fight, but to endure, to breathe when exhausted, to move with grace under pressure. Because in real battle, it's not always the strongest who wins. It's the one who doesn't lose themselves in the fight. In life, you will be hurt. You will be disappointed, betrayed, misunderstood. But these are not the end. They are invitations. Invitations to deepen, to release illusion, to discover endurance. And endurance is not passive. It is an active engagement with pain. It says, "I will not let this moment define me, but refine me." There's an old saying, "Smooth seas do not make skilled sailors." But the storms, they teach navigation, they teach patience, and most importantly, they teach what truly matters. When the superficial falls away, you find out what you've really been building all along. And so we must ask ourselves, not just how we respond to adversity, but how we prepare for it before it arrives. Because the time to build resilience is not in the storm, it's in the stillness. When no crisis is present, that's when you train. In your habits, your thoughts, your responses. Adversity does not knock, it enters. And when it does, what will it find inside you? There's a final story that may speak to this truth. A wise elder was approached by a young man who had just lost everything: his job, his relationship, and his confidence. He said, "I feel like a broken pot. Nothing useful left." The elder brought him to a river, handed him a cracked vessel, and asked him to fill it with water. The young man laughed. "It won't hold anything." But the elder insisted. So he filled it and walked back to shore, watching the water leak out drop by drop. When he arrived, the elder pointed to the trail. Along it were vibrant flowers. "Every day I have walked this path with that pot," the elder said. "And though it couldn't carry water, it watered the seeds. You thought you were failing, but even in your brokenness, you were giving life." That is the final, quiet power of character in adversity. Even when you feel weak, even when you are cracked, even when you think you have nothing left, If you walk with compassion, with discipline, with humility, your very presence is watering the world. And so, the path continues. Because with every trial, we are not just surviving, we are sculpting. And with every sculpted edge, a clearer version of who we are begins to emerge. There is a certain grace in how a person treats others when there's nothing to gain. No status to elevate, no advantage to secure, no applause to earn. It is in these moments, small, often unnoticed interactions, that the essence of one's character is revealed most clearly. The true measure of a person is not how they treat those who can offer them power or favor. It's how they treat those who can offer nothing at all. This quiet truth, often overlooked in a world driven by image and exchange, carries a profound weight. Because the soul speaks loudest when it has nothing to prove. In many traditions, there is a recurring theme. How you treat the least among us is how you treat all. The stranger, the elderly, the server, the one who stumbles, the one society has ignored. These become the unwitting tests of our inner life. And how we engage in those moments, with sincerity or indifference, speaks volumes beyond any title or proclamation. There was a young executive, freshly promoted, with a team beneath her. She was intelligent, driven, and eager to impress. On the surface, her performance was flawless. Reports submitted on time, results achieved, accolades growing. But the janitor on the night shift would tell a different story. Every night, she would leave her office in disarray. Food containers, papers, spills, never once acknowledging the one who cleaned up after her. One evening, as the janitor worked silently, she walked by without a glance. The older man simply said, "I hope your success doesn't cost you your soul." That night, something struck her. Not because he was rude, but because he was right. She realized that in her pursuit of greatness, she had lost touch with grace. And what is grace, if not the ability to see the dignity in others, regardless of their role, to respect the person behind the title, the hands behind the work, the heart behind the silence? Children often show us what we've forgotten. One child may stop to help another who dropped their books, even when the hallway rushes past. They don't calculate the value, they just respond from the heart. And maybe that's what purity of character looks like before the world teaches us to filter our kindness through personal benefit. There's a Buddhist parable about a monk and a beggar. The monk, traveling through a poor village, saw a beggar boy who was sick and unattended. The villagers warned him not to get involved. It was too dangerous, too risky. But the monk, without hesitation, carried the boy, bathed his wounds, and stayed by his side until he healed. When asked later why he did it, he said, "Because when the world teaches you to look away, the heart must remember to see." In the modern world, it's easy to perform kindness when cameras are watching, when the gesture can be posted, liked, and shared. But character is shown in the gestures no one sees. The kindness that expects nothing. The compassion extended when it's inconvenient. The listening ear offered to someone who can't do a thing for you in return. It was once said that the highest form of maturity is when you do good for someone who will never find out. That, right there, is soul integrity. We often speak of love in grand terms, sacrificial, eternal, poetic. But what about the small loves? The ones that show up when someone is tired, when someone is forgotten, when someone has failed. What about the quiet love that holds the door open, that asks how your day really was, that remembers your name when no one else does? There's a story about a man named Elias. He ran a small coffee cart in a busy city. Every day, professionals, students, and tourists would line up for their caffeine fix. Most came and went without noticing the man behind the cart. But one woman, every morning, would greet him with a smile, ask about his family, and once, even brought him a scarf in winter. Years later, after she passed away, Elias used the money he had saved over decades to open a scholarship fund in her name. When asked why, he simply said, "She was the first person who saw me, not the coffee, me." Sometimes all a person wants is to be seen, not for their utility, not for what they can offer, but simply as a fellow human being, a soul navigating life's complexities. And to give that recognition, that moment of dignity, is to offer something more valuable than gold. In martial arts, one learns early that respect is not earned by power alone. The bow, the gesture of humility, the way one treats opponents, these are as important as technique. Because the spirit of the practice is not domination, but discipline and honor. You are taught to respect those above you, beside you, and beneath you, not based on skill, but based on shared humanity. And this principle extends beyond the dojo, the driver who cuts you off, the employee who makes a mistake, the stranger who doesn't speak your language, the homeless man asking for change. How do you respond? With irritation, dismissal, or presence? The moment you think someone is beneath you is the moment your own development halts. Because in judging others, we often reveal more about our limitations than theirs. There's a concept in Taoism known as Wu Wei, effortless action, or flowing with the natural order. It encourages living in harmony with the universe, not fighting for control, but responding with awareness. Part of this harmony is recognizing the interconnectedness of all beings. No one is truly separate. Your action toward another ripples into the whole. A harsh word to one may echo into someone else's despair. A kind gesture may plant a seed in a garden you never see. The best people carry this awareness with them. They understand that every encounter is an opportunity to offer presence, respect, and compassion. Not because it's deserved, but because it's who they are. There's a tale told by travelers in Japan of a bus driver who would greet every passenger with a bow and a smile. Rain or shine, late or early, rich or poor. One day, a rider asked, "Why do you treat everyone the same?" The driver replied, "Because I do not know their burdens, but I know they carry them. And my greeting may be the only honor they receive all day." We do not always know what others are going through. The person snapping at you in line may have lost a loved one. The employee making a mistake may be battling depression. The teenager acting out may be carrying shame no one has ever asked about. This does not excuse bad behavior, but it invites compassion before condemnation. To see someone's true character, observe how they speak to those who have nothing to offer them. Watch how they treat the invisible, the marginalized, the forgotten. In one monastery, there is a ritual where novices must serve not just the elders, but the sick, the elderly, and the mentally unwell in nearby villages. The task is not glamorous, it is often thankless, but the masters understand. How a monk treats a frail man who cannot bow in return shows far more about his path than any chant or robe. And yet, there is another dimension, how we treat those who have wronged us. This too is a test of character. Not whether we excuse injustice, but whether we become hardened or remain human. The world will try to shape you into cynicism, into withdrawal, into tribalism, but character refuses to be molded by bitterness. There was a woman who forgave the man who took her son's life. Not because she forgot, but because she refused to live shackled to hate. She visited him in prison, spoke to him of transformation, and said, "I see the human in you, not just the harm." That kind of grace is not weakness. It is spiritual strength few can fathom. In the Shaolin tradition, one of the highest virtues is mercy, not just toward others, but toward oneself. Because when we offer compassion to those who have nothing to give, we also train our heart to soften its own edges. The one who can forgive, uplift, and encourage others, even when unacknowledged, is also the one who can sit in silence with their own failures and not drown in shame. So much of life is transactional. What can I get? What can I gain? But character lives in the non-transactional. In the moments where no one's watching, when your kindness won't be reposted, when your patience won't be praised, when your generosity is met with silence. There is an African proverb, the true test of a man's character is what he does when no one is watching. And that test is given daily, not just in grand acts of heroism, but in everyday choices. Do you return the cart to the stall? Do you say thank you with sincerity? Do you let others speak without planning your next sentence? Do you give others the benefit of the doubt? These are the grains of sand that make up the mountain of character. And sometimes, character is not what you do, but what you don't do. You don't retaliate. You don't belittle. You don't gossip. You don't seek revenge. You simply choose the higher road, again and again, even when it's lonely, even when it's quiet. A man named John once said that the greatest lesson his father taught him was this: if you want to know the value of your soul, look at how you treat those who can never repay you. John became a teacher, and every year, he would spend one lunch break each week sitting with the custodian staff, not to be noticed, but to be present. Because if I only sit with those at my level, I stay at my level, he said. Elevation doesn't come from titles. It comes from depth. And depth is built in the way you treat the invisible threads that hold life together. And so the thread continues. Because in each interaction, you are not just responding to a person. You are shaping your soul. You are writing your legacy. Not the one etched on stone, but the one carved into the hearts of others, silently, powerfully, permanently. It's not just about observing others. It's about evaluating ourselves. How do you act when you're in control? How do you respond when you're in crisis? Because maybe, just maybe, this message isn't about spotting character in others. Maybe it's about building it in you. The world doesn't need more performers. It needs more truth bearers, more soul keepers, more people who understand that true strength is not in domination or self-pity, but in discipline and grace. So I challenge you today, don't just look at what people say. Don't just believe what they post. Look at how they treat the small moments. Look at how they live when no one is applauding. Look at who they become when life stretches them. Because that, my friends, is where true character is born. And when you start living from that place, you don't just change your relationships, you transform your destiny. Thank you.